She is the youngest member of Congress, and she is someone many people inside and outside of Washington are paying close attention to what she has to say. I'm talking about New York Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This time, she is making headlines for floating the idea of this hefty tax increase on the super wealthy. So here is just a piece of her interview with Anderson on 60 Minutes.
You look at our tax rates back in the 60s, and when you have a progressive tax rate system, your tax rate, let's say from $0 to $75,000 may be 10% or 15%, et cetera. But once you get to like the tippy tops, on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%. That doesn't mean all $10 million are taxed at an extremely high rate, but it means that as you climb up this ladder, you should be contributing more.
And while her politics is already being branded as radical or impractical, some Democrats, like potential 2020 hopeful Julian Castro, are defending her.
Can you support a tax increase like that once you hit $10 million, 60, 70%?
Oh, I can support folks at the top paying their fair share. As you know, George, there was a time in this country where the top marginal tax rate was over 90%. Even during Reagan's era in the 1980s, it was around 50%. So do I support, in order to have something like Medicare for All, that we ask folks that are in the top 0.05% or 0.5% or the top 1% to pay more? Yeah, I support that.
Let's have a conversation. Two CNN political commentators with me now. Angela Rye is the former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus, and Tara Setmayer is a former communications director for the GOP. So, ladies, Tara, let me start with you. Just your reaction to the Congresswoman's floating this possible 70% tax hike.
Well, I mean, I think that that's ridiculous. There is no country that's comparable to ours in the world that has a taxation rate that high. The wealthy already pay more than their fair share. The top 10% pays 70% of all federal income taxes. The top 1% pays almost 40%. It's this idea, but it's very good marketing, to pit us versus them.
How do you
the
mean?
Rich. Well, because everyone, the rich must pay their fair share. The rich versus the poor, we don't have enough. There's income inequality, which there is, but pushing a taxation rate at that level on people who already pay a lot of taxes, and also they figure out ways to move their money around so it's not direct income taxes they pay anyway. There's all ways to get around it, even if you tried this at 70%. It's just another way of redistribution of wealth. This idea of democratic socialism doesn't work. And it never has worked, and it won't work in this country either. And she did not have a good answer for how she plans to pay for a lot of these grandiose ideas. Just taxing the rich is not enough. That's not going to work. And so it may sound good as a marketing tool, pay your fair share, but when you start getting into the details of it, it's not practical in any way, shape, or form, nor do I think it's necessarily good economics.
Yeah, I mean, her answer, I think, for critics of hers definitely feed into, well, she was only in college a few years ago and she doesn't really know policy very well. But then on the other hand, Angela, you have Julian Castro, who, not only agrees with her, but he then further alludes to, maybe it should be 90%. And I'm wondering from you, if a 2020 candidate is already responding to this and agreeing, do you think this is a sign of what's to come as we cover 2020?
I absolutely think it's a sign of what's to come, and I didn't hear either of them say that everyone needs to be, if they make $10 million, they need to be taxed at 70%. I think she actually said something a little different, which was it could be up to 70%, and I'm not talking about taxing the full $10 million. So we don't really know the nuance of that policy. I know that it makes for a great headline and it makes for great fodder, but I think that I kind of had enough of questioning the intelligence of this brilliant young woman who beat someone in congressional leadership to earn her seat at the table. And I think the least we can do is offer her the opportunity to come up with the policy proposals and then chew on that. But I think to say that because she comes up with something radical radical, whatever that might mean, in a climate that is extremely radical. Remember that this is now the second longest shutdown in government history. So the least we can do is talk about whether or not people are paying their fair share. Brooke, I was in the airport on Friday apologizing to TSA workers because they're working for free right now. So if you want to talk about radical, let's talk about people having to work for free to secure your livelihood for free. That's radical.
I know, and they're going to work and they can't go volunteer or make money elsewhere because they've got to show up. And especially when you talk about TSA and the FAA, we talked to someone last hour about that. But I do want to keep chewing on this 60 Minutes interview with Anderson and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And this is when she was asked about some of her past, and I think Anderson puts it, her fuzzy math. Here you go.
There's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
But being factually correct is important.
It's absolutely important. And whenever I make a mistake, I say, okay, this was clumsy. And then I restate what my point was. But it's not the same thing as the president lying about immigrants. It's not the same thing at all.
Angela, back at you. The moral piece of that aside, does she not sound like Donald Trump?
No.
Tell me why.
She doesn't sound like Donald Trump. I think for a number of reasons. One is, I think if she's saying there are things in this space that I still have yet to learn, right? I have the heart of the people with me. I know that there are interests that I'm pursuing, and I don't know all the ways in which I should get there, but I know that morally it's sound. Donald Trump is not morally sound. He's both morally bankrupt and factually
That's why
bankrupt.
I said take the morals out of it. But when we're talking facts, he's got some fuzzy facts.
You gotta be right.
He's got some fuzzy facts.
No, but here's the difference. If I can say, you know what, I misspoke, that's different than saying, this lie is now true today. And that is what we get from him. So I will acknowledge that she said it's clumsy and I have to come back and clean it up sometimes. I'm not perfect, y'all. Keep working with me. That's what I hear her saying.
But that's not
Tara?
What she said, though. That was probably the biggest blunder she made in that interview, because what she did was there was an equivalency to the rationale that people use to justify how Donald Trump speaks inaccurately and lies and makes things up. He never apologizes. He never corrects himself. And some people will say, well, it's the means justify the ends. Oh, so what if he's making up how many terrorists come through the border, or if he makes up, this or that? He means well. That was the exact same rationale she just used. She didn't say what Angela said. She didn't. You should play it again, because she never said, if I make a mistake, then I will correct that and be factually accurate. She said it was clumsy. That, to me, is not a full-blown assessment of saying, you know what, when I made a mistake, that means I'm learning on the job, give me a break. She didn't say that. She said clumsily, which to me didn't take full ownership of making a mistake. When the Washington Post gives you 4 Pinocchios for something, you can't, that's not being clumsy. That's a flat out falsehood.
Clumsy to me is when, so I'm a clumsy person. Clumsy to me is when you fall down. You still have the opportunity to get back up. Fall down means you made a mistake. So to say that she will make a mistake or she's clumsy with it, but she comes back, means that she's coming back to acknowledge that what she said was a mistake. It was a misstep. And
she
so
said to reiterate her point, not to correct the factual mistake. So again, it's if the moral end of it, the moral intention was right, well then, it doesn't matter. Everyone's so focused on my making, factual errors. No, honey, you're a member of Congress now. You have to get things right.
Honey, Tara.
Come on now, Angela, coming from you.
To the point though. But to the point though, right? We keep,
all right, ladies.
No, but I'm saying we keep treating her like she's this child, and I'm saying we have to respect the grown woman that she is. She's made it this
she's
far.
She's going to have to make grown woman answers.
And I think she has. I think that's exactly what she's doing every single day.
I appreciate the conversation. Everybody's watching her, those who want her to do well and those who don't think she will. She's got pressure on her, but we'll be watching. Ladies, thank you very much. I appreciate that conversation.